So, what is an academic essay exactly? The following slides, I'm going to break down what a college essay or an academic essay looks like. This is a very basic overview. It is actually a bit more complicated than I'm going to relate, but I feel like the basics here outlined are pretty consistent with what we're looking for, or what you'll have to produce in your future college classes. So, what is an expository or academic essay? An essay is a piece of writing that makes a point about a subject, problem, issue, or question that the writer feels is worth writing about. An essay is expository insofar as it centers on explaining rather than simply describing something or narrating an event. Exposition essentially means explanation. Strong expository essays explain why something is as it is or how something comes about. Strong expository essays show the connections between specific concrete facts or events and broader ideas that allow us to make sense of the world. In college writing, we are not so much concerned with summary or having you parrot back what you've read to prove that you've read something or that you've learned something, although that might find a way into your homework or even in some of your essays. The main purpose for writing in college is to show your opinion, to show your logic, and to reveal the steps it took for your brain to reach the conclusions that it made. So, what does an essay look like? Well, it starts with an introduction. The first paragraph of your essay is an introduction. It introduces the subject and contains thesis statement, which states your opinion or position on a topic or in response to a prompt. Then, after you have the introduction, you will have body paragraphs essentially supporting or explaining and breaking down the thesis statement listed in your introduction. Your body paragraphs are different from the introduction. The introduction, very first sentence of your essay, has a very different purpose than what your paragraphs are for. It's an important thing to remember. After you're done writing all of the paragraphs that support your thesis statement, you will conclude your essay. Okay. So, this model that you see here is a 5 paragraph essay model. That's a simple method for writing an essay. Note that when we get to the research paper, you will be writing more than 5 paragraphs because your essay will be 7 to 10 pages long. Okay. The reason why you've always written 5 paragraph essays is because it's just an introductory, simple model for what an essay looks like. But it's a bit more complicated than that, the more complicated the prompts get and how higher you get into your education. So let's break down each paragraph and its function, okay? The introduction is the first paragraph of your essay. It is like a blueprint for the rest of your essay. By reading your introduction, your reader should be able to do the following: get enough background of the story or topic to understand your thesis, and they should be able to predict what the rest of your essay will be about by reading your thesis. Okay? The thesis ends up at the bottom of your introduction, okay, or near the bottom of your introduction. It's 1 to 2 sentences long, and it tells the reader what the main idea of your essay is. This sets up the purpose for the rest of your essay, so please make it specific and clear. If the reader can't predict what the rest of the essay will be about specifically based on your thesis, then your thesis is not specific enough. Now, after you've written your introduction, you then have to write body paragraphs. And there are different elements within a body paragraph. A simple method or a simple way to remember what you need in a body paragraph is to think of the acronym PIE. PIE stands for point, illustrative example, and explanation. So let's break that down. The point is your topic sentence. Essentially, it is what's the point? right? Why are you writing about this topic? What is one reason why you support, deny, argue against, argue for, propose something? Okay. So the point is about 1 to 2 sentences long. You make a specific statement that previews the point of the paragraph, and it is a statement that requires some kind of explanation, i.e., it cannot be a fact, it has to be your opinion or an argument. Then, after you provide your point, you need to give an illustrative example to the reader so that they can see what you see. They can see an example that can be applied to your point. This could be a story, a personal example, a quote, a fact, a statistic. Essentially, anything that would illustrate your point. Then you would need to explain how your illustrative example and your point work together. This is also called analysis. Now, as a general rule, you want to have at least 2 to 3 lines of analysis per 1 line of evidence, i.e., or illustrative example. Okay. This is where you connect the idea you introduce in the topic sentence and the evidence. You ask yourself, how do these two pieces work together? How does the evidence illustrate your point? So it's important to understand that this is the majority of your essay. Okay, the majority of your essay, when added up all together, will be explanation or analysis. And analysis and explanation is very important because this shows your thinking. This shows the teacher and yourself that that you know how your example supports and illustrates your point of view. You essentially break it down for your reader, giving them the logical steps that you took in order to see the connection between whatever your point is and whatever your example is. So let's look at the point a little more closely. Ideas for making a topic sentence. You could decide what you want to say to support your thesis based on your reaction to a text. Okay. Sometimes that's an article, sometimes that's a book. You could categorize your ideas and make a comment on a recurring theme you found. You could reread your final sentence in the paragraph, in the body paragraph. Does it sum up your point? Does it say, ta-da, that's my point? If it does, go ahead and cut and paste it and put it at the beginning of your paragraph. That's very common for student writers. They will use the writing process to get them to their opinion. And at the end of their paragraphs, they'll usually tie it up with a bow and say, okay, that's my point. Well, the reader strategy is that the reader needs the topic sentence at the beginning, not the end of the paragraph. So although you may have written your way into your point, you then need to copy and paste that at the beginning of your paragraph to prepare the reader for what's to follow in the paragraph. Next, you have an illustrative example, i.e. evidence. Okay, so ideas for evidence. You can pull from information from the readings, articles you've been reading for class discussions. You could put in a paraphrase, a short quote. Usually you would include your personal experience. This is very important for the in-class essays and the final in-class essay exam. Most of what you have to draw from is from your personal experience, okay? These can include stories, anecdotes, or examples from your life. You could include representations of mass media from newspapers, magazines, and television to illustrate your point. Unless you're putting it in a research paper and then there are kind of rules that limit what you can put in a research paper. But for this essay, it's fine to do this. Elements from pop culture like song lyrics, movie lines, TV characters, celebrities. Definitions from the dictionary, the readings, or another source, and statistics, polls, percentages, data, and research study. All of those are usually fair game for an illustrative example. And finally, explanation or analysis. Ideas for analysis. You could interpret, analyze, or explain the information, opinion, or quote that you have included in your paragraph. You can comment maybe on the accuracy or the inaccuracy of a quote from an article or a fact, data, or information. You might decipher the meaning or try to better your understanding of your observation or of your experience itself. You could suggest to the reader how the information relates to your thesis. Explain how, what, and why your evidence illustrates or proves your point. Evidence never ever speaks for itself. You can never just put in a statistic and say, see, this proves that I am correct. You actually have to apply the statistic to your point to illustrate and explain how that statistic is relevant or how the story you've included is relevant. Then you end the essay with a conclusion paragraph. Keep in mind that the conclusion is not just a mere summary of your paper. In the conclusion, you ask yourself the questions that seem most relevant to you and your purpose. Things to consider now that you've written a whole paper on a certain topic. Do you feel as if you have any new insights? That could end up in the conclusion. Or what's the last thing you want the reader to know? Do you want to elaborate on a point you've already made? Do you want to convince them of something one last time? Did you propose anything throughout the essay? Do you have a solution to any of the problems you may have discussed? Or did you discover anything about yourself or your opinion as you were writing the essay? All of those questions can be answered in your conclusion. It is important to know that restating your thesis is not enough in your conclusion. In fact, you don't need to do that, and you will lose points if all you do is copy and paste your thesis statement and rewrite it verbatim into the conclusion.